We still have more to talk about, and the next topic is immigration, which I know is a serious problem for all of us. We have great concerns because we can see how this immigration issue is so insidious. We have two folks who are going to be talking about this subject. First up is Jessica Vaughn. She is a director of policy Director of Policy Studies for the Center of Immigration. Did I get that right? Center for Immigration Studies. Sorry, I got that in there twice. Can you tell I'm a little bit shook up after Trevor's suggestions? I love it. Her area of expertise is immigration policy and operations. She's been at the center since what did you start there? You've started in 92. Thank you. She is also, in addition to being the director at the Policy Center, she is also an instructor to senior law enforcement officers training at Northwestern University. Folks, help me welcome, please, Jessica Vaughn. I'm so sorry, I really messed that up.
You're fine, thank you. An eagle flies. It's a big old land with countless dreams and happiness.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Again, I'm Jessica Vaughn. I'm with the Center for Immigration Studies. Our website is www.cis.org, and I'm pleased to be here with you today. Glad to see there's some people fighting for our liberty, doing a job some Americans won't do, but we're glad to have them as part of the team. The Center for Immigration Studies is a research organization based in Washington, although I happen to live south of the border here in the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And hello to my fellow citizens of the Commonwealth that I see out here who've been working on this issue. Hey, Michael. And what we do is produce research and writing and analysis to make the case to policymakers and opinion leaders and the public for an immigration policy that puts our national interest ahead of the many, many special interests who have been trying to dictate our immigration policy, especially since I started in the early 90s. It was almost exclusively special interests who were creating our immigration policy with no thought to how it affects Americans and what the impact is on our country. There is no issue on which there is a greater disconnect between opinion leaders and the establishment and what we refer to as the elites in our society and the voters, the people, regular people in our country, than the immigration issue and immigration policy. And that gap is getting wider and wider all the time. The public wants to see the immigration numbers reduced by a 3-to-1 margin. And there have been some very important surveys of the public opinion and how these self-described opinion leaders in our elite groups throughout American society feel about the immigration issue. 60% of the public views current immigration levels as a critical threat to the U.S. national interest. In other words, they're too high. Only 14% of elites, people who consider themselves elites in our society, think immigration is a problem now. 55% of the public wants to reduce immigration. 27% wants it to stay the same. Among our leaders, only 18% want to reduce immigration, and 60% think it's at a good level right now. 70% of the public thinks illegal immigration is a very important issue. Only 22% of people who consider themselves elite opinion leaders agree with that. We did a survey of business executives and small business owners and union households a few years back and found that overwhelmingly those three groups prefer more enforcement instead of legalization or an amnesty. You're not going to find that opinion in the Chamber of Commerce office in Washington, nor the AFL-CIO either. They've all been among the primary, main important groups lobbying for amnesty. We did a survey of religious people in America and found that the majority of people who identified with the 4 major religious denominations in our country say immigration is too high now. And yet, the leaders of the major churches and faiths in the United States are out there on a daily basis lobbying or making the case for an amnesty, contrary to the views of their flock. All of this disconnect is the major reason why we have gridlock in our government right now on the immigration issue. Members of Congress in particular believe that they either believe themselves or they're being told by representatives and opinion leaders that we need more immigration and enforcement is too strict. But we're in uncharted territory now in our nation's history. In 5 years, 1 in 7 people in America will be foreign born, an immigrant. We take in a record number of immigrants today, 50 million 50 million people living in our country as of 2010 who were born in another country. Now, there's nothing wrong with people who were born in other countries, obviously. Has nothing to do with their value as human beings or people. But our government is not considering what the effect of the level of immigration is having on our country. The most profound effect it has, and the most important, is the distortion of our labor market that has occurred as a result. And the main reason for that is because most of the immigrants who have come to our country have not had the opportunity of an education that will enable them to be self-sufficient in our modern economy. And so the labor market has become distorted, and we have an oversupply, particularly of less educated workers who are consigned to low-skill and low-earning jobs. Doesn't make them bad people. They come here to work, but that's the reality of our immigration policy today. On top of it, most of the gains in employment that have occurred in the last few years, what few gains in employment we have seen in this economy, have gone to immigrants. And the participation of Americans in our labor force has gone down significantly in recent years. So any gains that we're seeing in our economy are not being realized by Americans because employers have other choices and they're allowed and encouraged and subsidized through our immigration policy to bypass Americans. In the meantime, and our immigration system is not broken. We take in 1 million immigrants through our legal system every year and 600,000 guest workers every year. Millions of visitors. We have about 1 million foreign students studying here today. And in the meantime, enforcement is in a state of collapse. ICE is releasing and ignoring more illegal aliens than they are arresting and removing. And this has an enormous impact on our taxes as well, of course, because about 1/3 of all immigrant households are using welfare programs, even illegal aliens in America. Despite this, the president wants to give work permits to 5 million of the people who are living here illegally and has been giving out, in fact, 1 million a year outside the rules that Congress wrote, 1 million a year work permits, be above and beyond green cards and work visas, only deporting felons, increasing the number of visitors' visas, and increasing guest workers. And now he's negotiated a free trade agreement that locks us into dysfunctional guest worker policies and would give a veto over those policies to other countries and to international tribunals. That's what he wants, even more power. After taking an unconstitutional executive action to give out work permits outside the boundaries of Congress, now he wants to Congress to give him the authority to negotiate trade agreements that will give control over our guest worker policies to other countries. And congressional leaders have the opportunity to stop this, but are choosing not to. And even in having watched this and seen how unpopular it is, where Americans by a 3-to-1 margin oppose these policies, most of the candidates for the next presidential election seem to agree with the president and with his immigration agenda in particular. Hillary Clinton, certainly. Jeb Bush, definitely. And they're the two supposed front runners right now. There's only one candidate I can think of who is for robust immigration enforcement and has made it very clear, and that is Ted Cruz. There's only one who's been for less legal immigration, Mr. Santorum. The rest have been pretty much silent on the immigration issue, which is a little puzzling considering how important an issue this is to our country. They talk about it in narrow terms. People like to say that they're for border enforcement and against presidential overreach, but no one is willing to say that immigration levels are too high or talk about what we need to do to solve the problem, like restoring immigration enforcement, for starters, enforce the laws we have, impose phased-in mandatory E-Verify, or stop the surge of illegal immigration from Central America. The field is wide open for a candidate to make this a defining issue, and many candidates in the last election did so successfully. Dave Bratt in Virginia, Tom Cotton in Arkansas, in Oregon, where the referendum to refuse to give driver's licenses to illegal aliens got more votes than their popular Democratic politicians. So what I suggest to you all is to educate yourselves. Make use of the websites of organizations like mine and also Numbers USA and the Federation for American Immigration Reform to educate yourself on the issues and challenge the candidates. How can you do that? You can ask them questions. Make it an issue any time you see them at a town hall. Ask them. I'm just going to run through quickly a list of questions here. Do you agree with the substance of the president's move to issue work permits to 5 million illegal aliens? Do you think immigration is too high, too low, or okay the way it is? And yes or no questions are obviously the best. Do you think the kids and families from Central America should be allowed to stay? Do you believe in driver's licenses for illegal aliens? Do you support mandatory phased-in E-Verify? Do you think local governments should be able to block immigration enforcement? Do you think illegal aliens should have access to welfare and other benefits? Do you think the Obama administration has deported too many people? Do you think we need to admit more guest workers? All of those are questions that would help you pin these candidates down and help them get away or not get away with just platitudes. You in New Hampshire have a unique opportunity to set the tone and require politicians to take a stand. And there's an old saying in our movement, you don't have to change their minds on this issue. All you have to do is change their position. And let them know, make sure they know that voters are not going to support more of the same. So I'll end on that note, and thank you all for being here and being willing to do this work for our country. Thanks so much.
Hard work pays off the way it should. Yeah, I've seen enough to know that we've got it good. With the stars and the stripes and the eagle flag.
It's something we all complain about, and those are some great ideas of the hard questions that we need to be asking the presidential candidates, and making ourselves more knowledgeable so that we can argue with the leftist liberals who want to just throw our doors open to everyone and anyone.
Croc TV.